Good afternoon. So I wanted to go over some kind of worst case scenario situations that could happen in your home. This is a little bit off topic from what I normally post, but I thought it'd be something interesting and hopefully informative. So your home is meant to be a place of security and comfort, and any kind of emergency situation can really upend that feeling of safety and security, and it could even possibly spiral out of control. As the leader of your household, or maybe as the spouse of a leader of your household, it's your responsibility to create a plan of action for some of the more common scenarios. So I wanted to go over a few of those scenarios and maybe give you some tips on what you can do to hopefully start the process of creating a plan of action. So the first one we'll go over is home invasion, God forbid. Um, so you would have to prepare for human threats in general. More than 1 million burglaries occur in the United States every year. So if you think someone has broken into your house, then you should verify their presence, number one, before taking any action. You can arm yourself, not necessarily with a deadly weapon, but maybe with a pepper spray or a taser, something to hopefully uh, alleviate the threat, at least temporarily. Determine if you can escape the house without encountering the intruder altogether. Even with firearms training, they always say the first thing to try to do is to run. It's a run, hide, fight sort of situation in that order. So fleeing from the premises is probably a good thing. Of course, calling the police to have them come out. If you can't escape, then hide together in a room. So if you have your family, your whole family with you, you want to make sure you're all in the same room, turn off the lights, and keep very, very quiet. So you really want the house to look like nobody's there. So locking the door or something like that, as good of an idea as that may sound, may not be the best option, because then the intruder would then obviously know that somebody is home because the door is locked. Like an interior door. Obviously, you would lock your exterior doors. Um, you want to call the police from your hiding place if you can't escape, and follow the dispatcher's instructions. And if a violent encounter is inevitable, be prepared, unfortunately, to use lethal force. That pepper spray, taser, things like that can help. If you're not ready to use any kind of lethal or deadly force, then having pepper spray or a taser, something that will get you and your family out of that situation as quickly as possible by subduing the intruder, at least for a moment, is your best bet. Um, but it is never a good idea, just to forewarn you, it's never a good idea to directly confront that intruder, because you don't know if they're armed or if they have accomplices hiding nearby. Just let them come to you if you have to be in a hide situation, and exhaust all other options before using some kind of weapon or some kind of force. The second thing is a flood. Here in Florida, we experienced last year alone with our hurricanes some serious flooding. So, a flood in Florida is a real possibility, and you need to prepare for it. So, if water starts reaching dangerous levels, especially during a hurricane or a flood event, then you want to start gathering your items for your, they say, a vehicle survival kit if you don't already have one, but a survival kit of some kind. So, usually that's going to include your basic tools, basic food, maybe some extra sets of clothing, and you're going to want it for yourself and your family. So in my household, it's just my husband and I at this point, so we just have a bag for each of us. But at the time when our son was with us, yes, we kind of prepared for what if he was here, what if we had to go with him or him go with us. You can sit tight and wait for a local evacuation order. So they, a lot of times pre-hurricane, they will tell you what areas need to evacuate. Now I'm here in the center of the state, so we don't usually get a lot of evacuation notices like you would if you were on the coast. However, the local evacuation order is going to be, they usually will look at the best time based on the situation to leave the premises or to evacuate the area. Um, don't hesitate though to leave if the water starts approaching your home or into your home. So you definitely don't want it getting so bad in your house that you can't get your car out or you can't get out. Especially if you're not a swimmer, you definitely don't want to have to deal with that situation. It would already be stressful enough. Um, if you can move for higher ground, that's where you want to be. They say head farther inland or move for higher ground. Again, here in Central Florida, we already are inland, so higher ground is our option here. And then, of course, if you can't evacuate, you want to grab some kind of flotation device. Or move to a second floor and call emergency services for rescue. If you remember back to Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, a lot of people, you saw the evacuation where they were literally on their roof because the flooding and the water was so great. So that may end up being your only option at that point. But the sooner that you act on one of these things, as far as a flood, probably the better. You can't protect your house itself from an incoming flood, but you can gather as many of your belongings as possible to save them from the waters. However, like I said, don't waste too much time. You want to pack your things and hit the road once the evacuation order occurs or once you need to leave because there is no other option. Don't wait too long where you can't leave. A third thing to prepare for, which is pretty common here in Florida, even during regular storms, are power outages. It's a common occurrence during any extreme weather event, but you just want to follow some simple steps. You want to pull out a portable light source and check if the rest of the neighborhood lost power. I have a tendency just to open windows during the day, but at night, obviously, I would want some sort of flashlight. You want to check your breakers and see if a power overload occurred that caused the shutdown. We recently, about a month or two ago, experienced our neighbors had a lightning strike actually, and a lot of the breakers in our house flipped along with our GFI protectors on our outlets and stuff. Nobody else in the neighborhood was without power, so we had to go in and reset all those breakers. So it does happen even in a regular thunderstorm. You want to contact your power company for assistance if the problem is unique to your home. I will tell you one GFI that we did not consider when that lightning strike happened was the one in our garage for our garage door. So I ended up calling the power company and letting them know that part of my house was still without power, even though the other half of my house was working fine. So they actually did send a guy out to kind of check things out. Unfortunately, by the time he got here, I had figured out what the problem was. So it was all good, but he did still check things from the outside on outward to make sure everything was functioning properly for us. So that was kind of a good bonus there for us. Um, you want to keep the fridge and refrigerator closed so they can retain cold temperatures. The same holds true for your house, especially here in Florida. It is hot as Hades this time of year, and keeping your outside doors closed, not letting the heat in or the AC out, is probably the best course of action. The cold will always follow out to the heat. I think that's the way it goes. I would have to ask my husband, but one follows the other, and so either way, you end up where you lose your cold and gain all the heat. If the outage occurs during the winter, you want to dress accordingly and huddle together to stay warm. In Florida, we don't have that problem, but in northern states and stuff, that could very well be a problem. So just keep that in mind. You definitely want to make some long-term preparations for a power outage. Usually, electricity is one of the first things to go during some sort of extreme situation. You can invest in alternative energy sources if you wanted to, or you want to make sure that you have plenty of backup um, light sources and battery powered type stuff, for your generator. A lot of times, like during a hurricane, they say make sure you have fuel for your generators, make sure you have food for long term power outages, shelf stable food for long term power outages, things like that. The next is a house fire. Again, God forbid, but they can arise from many sources, including cooking, smoking. Chimneys are also common for house fires because they gather many flammable substances such as soot and creosote. So a lot of times, if you have a wood burning fireplace, the fireplace manufacturers will tell you to make sure that you're using seasoned wood that doesn't have all the sap, the creosote, and all that in it. So that is something to factor in. You want to probably get that your fireplace checked out on a regular basis, just like you would your AC system, just to make sure you don't have these problems and a chimney sweep comes out and he will clean your fireplace for you. You also need to keep your living room, kitchen, and fireplace clean. And if the fire still occurs, then you want to make sure that you follow the following instructions. If the flames are small and centralized, try to put them out with a fire extinguisher or smother them with a non-flammable object. Do not use your dish towel to put out a fire in your kitchen. We actually have a couple of fire extinguishers in our house, and one happens to be right under our kitchen sink, which is literally just a turnaround from the stove. So if I ever had a kitchen fire of some kind, I could use that. If the flames have gotten out of control, then you want to call 911 and evacuate the house immediately. Smoke inhalation can be deadly, so it is something that you want to remove yourself from as quickly as possible. If at that point it's so bad, you want to move in a crouching or crawling position during evacuation to avoid inhaling the smoke. We kind of learned this in elementary school to get underneath the smoke and underneath the flames, to touch the doors, make sure that they're not hot before you proceed out the one door and into another room. You know, if you're in a room with a window, it might just be best to go out the window if it's available to you and not smothered in flames. But once outside, you want to stand far away from the house in case an explosion or a collapse occurs. You definitely don't want to have a secondary event happen that could hurt you in any way. So there's not much you can do to stop a house fire once the flames reach a certain size or a certain point. Um, but contacting authorities, evacuating the house, and trying to save some of your belongings within reason are going to be your best bet. Um, and again, if you do have an instance where you do have a flame that started on your clothing or something, we all again know from preschool and elementary school, stop, drop, and roll. I know in an instant of sheer panic, it is very hard to think about these things, but it is important to maybe even practice them during a non-emergency situation. So if the emergency does happen, you've kind of got the intuition to do it right. Another one is burns. They're most common home injury because they come from chemicals and electrocutions, or when you're cooking, maybe you end up with a burn. But to administer proper first aid, you want to evaluate the burns severity. First and second degree burns are treatable at home, but third degree burns require professional care. So you definitely will want to make it to the ER as quickly as possible if you think you have a third degree burn. You want to start by running lukewarm water over the affected area to reduce pain and swelling. I have a tendency when I get burned doing stove things, I know it's only just a first degree burn, but I want to run ice cold water because it is the polar opposite of a burn. But they say lukewarm water is the best option there. You want to treat the burn with aloe vera, lidocaine, or silver sulfadiazine. Um, Aloe, we have aloe plants in our yard, so I could just go out there and pick one up. However, aloe lotion or lidocaine is the best option there, as far as stuff that's easily findable over the counter. Then you want to cover the burn with a clean and cool gauze pad. You don't want to tie the pad too tightly because you need the circulation there from your blood flow and everything to help with the healing process. But just make sure that the gauze is clean. Once it gets too um, dirty with blood or whatever, you're going to want to make sure that you're changing it out regularly, because leaving it too long could start causing infection and other stuff. So um, you should never use ice or cold water to treat burns because they constrict the blood vessels and interfere with the healing process, which is why they recommend lukewarm water. Again, like I said, I have a tendency to want to just turn it on full cold. But then again, you know, what do they consider lukewarm? Because here in Florida, our water does not get ice cold. So maybe our cold is lukewarm. You also shouldn't pop the burn blisters. You want to keep them intact to avoid infection. So um, finally, deep lacerations, which is also another common household injury, sometimes from cooking, using tools, or doing recreational activities. Um, you want to stop the bleeding as best as possible. You want to evaluate the wound severity and call 911 if necessary, or head directly to the ER. You're going to grab a thick gauze pad, towel, or dishcloth and apply pressure to the wound. You want to elevate the wound above the heart to reduce blood flow if possible. You want to talk to the person who is injured and keep them calm and awake because shock can sometimes put people into a want of going to sleep because they are tired, and that's not necessarily the best idea. And if you manage to stop the bleeding, wash the wound with water and wrap it in a clean bandage. I can tell you a few years ago, my husband and I were out chopping wood in our backyard. The back of our chopping axe has an anvil on the back, so he went and got a sledgehammer because the axe was stuck in the wood. Came down on the back of that anvil, and a piece of the metal broke off and impaled my stomach. Completely freak accident. It's kind of a funny story now within the family, but every time walking around the hospital and everything, they were like, "Is that really what happened?" And we were like, "Yeah, that's really what happened." And they were like, "Man, that is just so freakish." But the reason we went to the hospital mainly was because we couldn't find the piece. So we figured it was probably still stuck in my stomach. At the time, I weighed a whole lot more. So fortunately, my fat stopped it where it was and didn't actually cause any kind of serious injury. Um, but we had the time to go to the emergency room. Um, but many people do, just so you know, many people get squeamish when you're talking about large amounts of blood. For me, I can take very little blood and I get very squeamish. So it is normal, but you can't let it affect your decision making. So you don't want to try to make a tourniquet or to move any exposed bones, muscles, or organs. Just the thought of that is ugh. Anyway. But definitely be as calm and rational as you possibly can. It is almost nearly impossible to prepare for every single potential scenario that could happen. But you want to have the basics in place. And you want to always to never think that it can't possibly ever happen to you, because it could. I mean, look at my husband and I doing yard work. We were doing yard work, and that's what ended up happening. So you have to try to prepare for every scenario that you possibly can, especially these most common scenarios. Avoid panicking, stay calm, and it all might just turn out okay. You might save your life as a worst case scenario. I hope that helped a little. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Hi, thank you for watching my video. Please click the like and the subscribe button to my YouTube channel. And if you're ready to get the process started with home buying or home selling, then please give me a call today. Thank you. Bye.